earlier today in the U.S. Senate, after Congress, of course, and the House side, they defeated the bailout bill. Earlier tonight, the U.S. Senate did pass it 74 to 25. Right now, it's sitting at more than 400 pages. I want to ask each of the candidates this evening what you feel, again, about this bailout bill. It affects every facet of the American economy. It certainly would affect Alaskans as well. Mr. Haase, we'll start with you. We'll give you 90 seconds. Your feelings about this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Todd. As I was starting earlier, when I was a young man in real estate, savings and loans made most of the home loans. They made 80% loans. And in the 10 years before the bailout, the savings and loans that I worked with never had a foreclosure. Like I say, they had a loan committee. You could go and talk to the guy in charge. If you had a problem, you renegotiated your loan. Today, that very same savings loan has a sign on it that says Washington Mutual, and tomorrow it's going to be Chase Morgan. What's happened here is we have taken away our local control of our lending. We've taken it just like we've done with our schools. And it's just a setup for the powers of central banking and bankers in Europe, the same people that our forefathers came to this country to set up a new nation, and they're setting us up for servitude.
Okay, appreciate your time. Mr. Byrd, I'll ask you the same question. You have 90 seconds.
As a candidate for the United States Senate, I can tell you that I would be bound by only one thing, the Constitution and nothing but the Constitution. There's been an argument, a false argument, that, gee, there's people who believe in loose construction and those that believe in strict construction, and it's just too bad we just can't resolve it. But in fact, the Constitution takes sides. It is unquestionably mandatory that we have a strict construction of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment makes this absolutely clear, which is why it is utterly and completely ignored. Bailing out people through welfare or corporations through welfare is utterly unconstitutional, and it is destructive. The reason why it is destructive is because two things happen. Either you raise taxes on the middle class and the working class, or, since that's so unpopular, the Federal Reserve winds up pumping in false, valueless paper money into the economy, which is a windfall for the first recipients, but by the time it gets down to us, further down the totem pole, prices have been raised and our salaries cannot keep pace with the inflation rate. This is what is going to happen. As a teacher, I can tell you I've seen market corrections before, and they're meant to correct and not to destroy the market. By refusing the discipline of the needed market correction, we are setting ourselves up for an even worse disaster.
Mr. Byrd, thank you very much, and we'll go back to topic now and ask you, we'll start with you, Mr. Byrd. You have a minute and a half, 90 seconds to answer this next question. Outside of education, what do you feel are the top 3 issues facing children and youth in our community today, and what would you do as a U.S. Senator to solve that?
We've taken the presumption that the government is in charge of children, when in fact there is no substitute for the family. Now, the family has come under attack through self-inflicted wounds that we have created, and I could list them all, and all of us are probably going to find them controversial. As a teacher, I can tell you I remember when divorce was very rare, and now I can tell you that the biggest problems we have with kids who have trouble being educated probably are from families that have been broken up and become dysfunctional. So I have to tell you that the number one thing is sometimes not inside of the purview of government. We have looked upon government as almost a godlike power that is in charge of the children, in charge of making sure everyone gets an education, when in fact we have to solve some problems outside of government, and that is we have to rediscover the value of family and the commitment that comes with it. Secondly, I would say that we have to restore protection to the family by reducing government. Whenever you take a federal handout, you also get federal dependency and control. And I'm very concerned as I see the insidious way that people are willing to accept money and don't realize that they are then going to get dependency and finally control by the government. We must break this matrix, and it is outside of the government to fix some of our social problems.
Mr. Bird, thank you very much. Mr. Haase will ask you the same question. Outside of education, what are the top 3 issues facing children and the community today? And again, as a U.S. Senator, what would you do to address those?
Well, leave it to the locals is my motto for schools. The No Child Left Behind is nothing more than a way to psychologically profile our children so that they can be dumbed down. The real problem that I see with our children is the dropouts. It's not the young ones, it's the older ones. At age 15 and 16, a child goes through a time where they either make it or they break it. And we used to have apprentice programs in all sectors: electricians, plumbers, carpenters, printers. Today we have either go to college or drop out. And thank God most of them go to college, but too many of them drop out. And we've got to figure out a way to mentor these childs at 15, 16. I was an Army recruiter for 5 years, and at age 14 and 15, every kid there would join the military if they had a chance. Not everyone, but many of them. By the time they get to 17 or 18, they no longer qualify because they've gotten into some sort of problems. And that's the children that we need to save, the 15, 16-year-olds.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll go back to Mr. Bird for the next question. You have 90 seconds. Excuse me. What efforts would you take to continue funding the State Children's Health Insurance Program, or SCHIP?
Yes,
90 seconds.
Yes, in my prepared statement, I would simply say that the 10th Amendment makes it very clear Congress can provide funding only for those activities listed in Article 1, Section 8. The fact that we've been ignoring the 10th Amendment has created this federal dependency, and now we're going to get federal control. There is nothing that a candidate for federal office can do if they properly understand the Constitution that would permit this sort of thing. I teach the Constitution word for word. I've been doing it for just about 25 years. Instead of letting the textbook tell us what the Constitution means, I use the great books method. It takes me from late August till mid-January to cover the entire Constitution. Every student in my classroom, about halfway through, can obviously see that the government does one thing and total contrariness to what the Constitution permits. And so I'm going to have to say almost categorically for all of these questions asking for federal funding, they are unconstitutional. But aside from that, what about the merits? And again, I'm going to say that the government cannot substitute the family. The number one thing you can do to help the family is to protect pensions and savings, because it gives families independence. But pensions and savings become increasingly worthless through inflation. So if the number one thing we want to find out to help children, we must stop inflation so that the families can once again begin to assert their own independence from government assistance.